I asked where he was. He sent me a photo of them together. Not by accident, not a mistake. He wanted me to see it. After 17 years of marriage, that's how my husband chose to tell me he was done. A photo of him with another woman, sent deliberately, cruelly, like he was flipping a switch to end our life together. My name is Diane. I'm 55 years old, and I live in the Hyde Park neighborhood of Austin, Texas. Today, I volunteer at a women's community center. I'm a grandmother to 2 beautiful grandkids, and I'm in a loving relationship with a man who treats me with the respect I should have demanded decades ago. But 3 years ago, I was a completely different woman. I was someone who'd spent 17 years making excuses for a man who didn't deserve them. That photo arrived on a Thursday afternoon in March. I can still remember exactly where I was standing. The smell of coffee brewing in my kitchen, the sound of birds outside my window. One moment I was living in what I thought was my marriage, flawed but fixable. The next moment, I was staring at proof that everything I believed was a lie. And the worst part, he'd sent it on purpose. He wanted me to know. That level of cruelty, that calculated coldness, told me more about who Marcus really was than 17 years of marriage ever had. Before I tell you this story, and I promise it's going to take you places you won't expect, I need you to do something for me. Leave a comment below and tell me where you're watching from. Are you someone who's ever had that moment when everything you believed shattered in an instant? Have you ever been discarded in a way so cruel you couldn't believe it was happening? Wherever you are, whatever you're going through, know that you're not alone. And please, hit that subscribe button. Because every day I'm sharing stories of women who survived the unthinkable and came out stronger on the other side. The story I'm about to share covers 17 years of my life with a man I thought I knew. A musician, an artist, someone the Austin music scene adored. Everyone thought we were the perfect creative couple. No one knew that behind the romance and the music and the late-night gigs, I was living with someone who was leading a double life. And when he decided he was done, he didn't have the decency to tell me face to face. He sent a photo, one photo that destroyed everything and, eventually, set me free. I met Marcus at the Austin City Limits Music Festival when I was 35 years old. I'd been teaching high school English for 10 years at Anderson High School, living a quiet, structured life in a small apartment near the university. My weekends were spent grading papers, reading novels, going to bookstores. I wasn't looking for a relationship. I'd had a few over the years, nothing that stuck, and I was content with my single life. But that October afternoon, standing in the crowd watching a blues band, Marcus appeared next to me with 2 beers. "You look like you could use one of these," he said, handing me a cold bottle. He had this easy confidence, long hair pulled back in a ponytail, wearing a vintage band t-shirt and jeans. He was 43, 8 years older than me, with laugh lines around his eyes and calloused fingers from playing guitar. We talked through the entire next set. He was a music producer, owned a small recording studio in East Austin, worked with local bands and solo artists. He'd been in the Austin music scene for 20 years, knew everyone, had stories about legendary shows and late-night jam sessions. He made me laugh with his impressions of demanding musicians and told me about the magic of capturing the perfect take in the studio. When I told him I was a high school English teacher, he didn't make jokes or seem disappointed like other men had. Instead, he got excited. "That's incredible. You're shaping young minds, introducing them to great literature. That's real art, just like music." He asked which books I taught, listened intently when I talked about getting teenagers to care about poetry. For the first time in years, someone made me feel like my work mattered. We exchanged numbers, and he called the next day. Our first real date was at a small live music venue on Red River Street. Marcus knew the band playing, introduced me to half the people there. Everyone seemed to love him. The bartender gave him free drinks. The sound guy came over to chat between sets. I felt like I was being welcomed into a world I'd never been part of, this creative, vibrant Austin music community. The courtship was intense and fast. Marcus would show up at my apartment after late studio sessions with takeout and wine. We'd talk until 3 in the morning about music, literature, art, life. He played guitar for me, wrote a song with my name in it. He took me to hidden spots around Austin, secret swimming holes, and late-night taco trucks. Everything felt spontaneous and alive in a way my structured teacher life never had. 3 months after we met, he asked me to move in with him. He had a house in Hyde Park, an old bungalow with a converted garage studio in the back. "I want to wake up with you every day," he said. "I want to come home from the studio and find you reading on the couch. You're my person, Diane." I should have taken it slower. I should have questioned the intensity. But at 35, after years of careful, reasonable dating that never led anywhere, Marcus felt like finally finding the right frequency. I moved in 2 weeks later. The first year was magical in that reckless way new relationships can be. Marcus introduced me to musicians, artists, people who stayed up all night talking about creativity and passion. I'd never been part of a scene like that. My world had always been structured, academic, predictable. His world was chaotic, creative, full of people who lived for art and music. We got married at a small ceremony at Zilker Park with a blues band playing and our friends drinking beer on the lawn. I wore a simple white dress. Marcus wore a suit jacket over jeans. My parents came from Dallas, looking confused by the whole bohemian vibe but trying to be supportive. My mother pulled me aside before the ceremony. "Are you sure about this? You barely know him. He's so different from you." But different felt good. Different felt like finally breaking out of the safe, boring pattern my life had been in. "I'm sure, Mom, he makes me happy." And he did, in those early days. He made me feel young and free, and part of something bigger than lesson plans and parent-teacher conferences. We talked about having kids right away. Marcus wanted a family, said his studio work would allow him to be home more than a traditional job. I got pregnant for months after the wedding. Our daughter Riley was born when I was 36, and our son, Tyler, came 2 years later. But even during my pregnancy with Riley, there were signs I chose not to see. Marcus was gone more than he'd promised. Late studio sessions that ran until 3, 4 in the morning. Weekend gigs that kept him away overnight. When I'd call to check in, he'd sound annoyed. "Babe, I'm working. I can't be on the phone all the time. You have to trust me." Trust. That word became his weapon. Anytime I expressed concern about where he was or who he was with, it became about my lack of trust. "I thought you were different," he'd say. "I thought you understood that creative work doesn't fit into a 9-to-5 schedule. If you're going to be one of those wives who needs constant check-ins, this isn't going to work." So I stopped asking. I stopped calling. I took care of Riley alone while Marcus worked. I told myself this was normal for someone in the music industry, that I'd known what I was signing up for when I married an artist. My structured teacher life had to adapt to his creative chaos. After Tyler was born, Marcus's absence became even more pronounced. He'd come home at dawn, sleep until noon, then head back to the studio. He missed Riley's first steps because he was at a show in San Antonio. He wasn't there when Tyler spoke his first word because he had a critical recording session that couldn't be rescheduled. By the time the kids were in elementary school, I'd become a single parent who happened to be married. Marcus was home so rarely that Riley and Tyler stopped asking where Daddy was. They just accepted that he lived at the studio, occasionally appearing for dinner or a weekend morning before disappearing again. I tried to talk to him about it. Multiple times I sat him down, explained that the kids needed their father, that I needed my husband, that his absence was creating a hole in our family. Each time, the conversation went the same way. He'd get defensive, tell me I didn't understand the music industry, that he was building something important, that his work required this level of commitment. Asterisk, "Do you think I want to be gone all the time?" he'd ask. "I'm doing this for us, for our family. The studio is finally making real money. We're signing bigger artists. I can't walk away now when everything's coming together." Then, he'd flip it on me. "Maybe if you were more supportive of my career, more understanding of what it takes to succeed in this business, we wouldn't be having this conversation." So I'd back down. I'd apologize for not being supportive enough. I'd go back to managing everything alone while he pursued his dreams. My teaching job, the kids' schedules, homework, meals, doctor appointments, parent-teacher conferences, birthday parties. I did it all while Marcus was at the studio. The financial situation was strange too. Marcus handled all the money. The studio income went into accounts I didn't have access to. He gave me a household allowance each month, said it was easier this way, that he understood business finances and I didn't. When I asked to see our accounts, to understand our financial situation, he'd get irritated. "You don't trust me with money now. After everything I've built, the studio is doing great. We're fine. You don't need to worry about the details." Any attempt to be involved in our finances became another sign of my lack of trust, my controlling nature, my inability to let him handle his business. His phone became an extension of his hand, always checking it, always responding to texts, always taking calls in another room. If I picked it up to hand it to him, he'd snatch it away like I was trying to steal state secrets. It's work stuff, client confidentiality. You wouldn't understand the contracts and agreements I'm dealing with. There were other signs I tried to ignore. Lipstick on his collar that he said came from an artist kissing his cheek after a successful session. Perfume in his car that he claimed was from giving a female musician a ride. Hotel charges on the credit card for cities where he said he was staying with friends. Long showers as soon as he got home. Washing off whatever, or whoever he'd been with before facing his family. My friends started commenting. At book club, at school events, they'd ask carefully worded questions. How are things with Marcus? Do you guys ever spend time together anymore? Are you okay, Diane? You seem tired. I'd make excuses, defend him, explain that creative careers were different, that he was dedicated to his art, that I understood and supported his work, but at night, lying alone in our bed while he was supposedly at the studio, I'd stare at the ceiling and wonder who I'd become. The confident teacher who'd stood in front of a music festival crowd accepting a beer from a stranger had disappeared. In her place was someone who apologized constantly, who walked on eggshells, who accepted crumbs of attention and called it a marriage. The kids started acting out. Riley became withdrawn at school, her teachers expressing concern. Tyler developed anxiety. Afraid to sleep alone, needing constant reassurance. When I suggested family therapy, Marcus refused. There's nothing wrong with our family. You're making problems where there aren't any. Maybe you're the one who needs therapy if you're so unhappy. So I went to therapy alone. Dr. Patricia Martinez's office became my sanctuary. The 1 hour a week where I could be honest about how lonely I was, how disconnected I felt, how much I questioned my own reality. She asked questions that made me uncomfortable. Does Marcus's behavior match his words? Do you feel like an equal partner in your marriage? What would you tell a friend in your situation? I couldn't answer those questions honestly without admitting things I wasn't ready to admit, so I'd deflect, make excuses, explain the unique challenges of being married to an artist. Dr. Martinez would nod patiently, jot notes, and gently push back. It's interesting that every concern you raise, Marcus turns into a criticism of you. That's called deflection, Diane. The Austin music community had embraced me initially, but over the years I'd become invisible. At shows and events, musicians and artists would greet Marcus enthusiastically while barely acknowledging me. I was just the wife, the boring teacher, who didn't understand the creative life. Sometimes I'd catch women looking at Marcus with too much familiarity, touching his arm too casually, laughing too loudly at his jokes. When I mentioned these observations to Marcus, he'd laugh. You're being paranoid. These are my colleagues. This is how people in the music scene interact. It's friendly. It's warm. It's not what you're thinking. Then the inevitable follow-up. I can't believe you're jealous of professional relationships. That's really insecure, Diane. His absences got longer, full weekends away for festivals and conferences, week-long trips to LA and Nashville to work with artists who'd supposedly requested him specifically. I'd be home with the kids, maintaining the house, teaching my classes, living a completely separate life from my husband. During one of those trips, Riley asked me a question that broke my heart. She was 12, sitting at the kitchen table doing homework. Mom, do you and Dad actually love each other? Because it doesn't seem like it. I tried to reassure her, to explain that adult relationships were complicated, that love looked different after years of marriage. But even as I said the words, I didn't believe them. Riley's question haunted me for weeks. Did Marcus and I actually love each other? I started watching our interactions with new eyes, like I was observing strangers. When he was home, which was rare, we moved around each other, with careful politeness. Good morning. There's coffee. Thanks. Did you pay the water bill? Yes. The kids need new shoes. I'll leave cash on the counter. We hadn't had a real conversation in months. We hadn't been intimate in over a year. The few times I'd tried to initiate, Marcus had excuses. He was tired from a late session. He had an early morning. He was stressed about a difficult client. Eventually I stopped trying. The rejection hurt less than the effort. I started noticing patterns I'd been too exhausted to see before. Marcus's trips to LA and Nashville always coincided with music festivals and conferences, but when I looked up the dates online, they didn't match. He'd be gone during South by Southwest week but claim he was working in California. He'd say he was at a Nashville recording session during the same weekend as a major Austin music festival. One evening when he was supposedly I saw his car parked outside a bar on South Congress. I drove past twice to make sure, my heart pounding. It was definitely his vintage Toyota truck with the studio logo on the side. I pulled over, hands shaking, trying to decide what to do. Should I go inside? Confront him? What if he had a reasonable explanation? I sat in my car for 30 minutes, working up courage. Finally, I walked to the bar entrance. Through the window, I could see Marcus at a corner table with a woman. She was young, maybe late 20s, with tattoos covering her arms and bright red hair. They were sitting close, his hand on her knee, both laughing. As I watched, she leaned in and kissed him. Not a friendly peck, a real kiss. I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach. I walked back to my car in a daze, drove home, and sat in the driveway for an hour trying to process what I'd seen. When Marcus came home around 2 in the morning, he found me still awake in the living room. "Why aren't you in bed?" he asked, dropping his keys on the counter. "How was I asked, my voice surprisingly steady. "Exhausting. The studio wasn't set up right. We had to completely reconfigure. Took all night." He was so casual with the lie, like he'd had years of practice, which, I realized, he probably had. "I saw your truck tonight, on South Congress. You weren't in LA." His face went blank for just a moment. Then he recovered, shifting into offense mode. "You're following me now. Seriously, Diane, that's psychotic behavior. My truck's been having issues. I lent it to someone from the studio while I was gone. But the fact that you're stalking me, tracking my vehicle, that's a huge problem." He was so convincing. For a moment, I almost believed him, almost apologized for being suspicious. But I'd seen him with my own eyes. "I saw you, Marcus. You were inside the bar, with a woman." "Oh, so now you're spying on me through windows? This is insane." "That was a client meeting. Sarah's a musician I'm working with. We were discussing her album." "Is every professional interaction I have now suspicious to you?" He shook his head like I was the unreasonable one. "I can't live like this, with you questioning everything I do. Maybe you need to talk to your therapist about these trust issues." The gaslighting was so smooth, so practiced. He almost made me doubt what I'd seen. But I couldn't unsee that kiss. That didn't look like a client meeting. "You know what? I'm not doing this. I'm not going to defend every innocent interaction because you've decided to become paranoid and jealous. Figure out your issues, Diane. I'm going to bed." He walked to the bedroom, leaving me sitting there questioning my own eyes, my own sanity. After that night, I became hyper-aware. I started checking phone bills, looking at credit card statements, noting inconsistencies. There were charges at restaurants and hotels that didn't match his stories, phone calls to numbers I didn't recognize, sometimes lasting over an hour, Venmo payments to women's names for amounts that seemed too personal to be business. I created a folder on my laptop, hidden deep in my files, where I documented everything: screenshots of charges, notes about lies I'd caught him in, photos of receipts I found in his pockets. I didn't know what I was going to do with this information, but some part of me was building a case, preparing for something I couldn't yet name. My teaching suffered. I'd zone out during lessons, lose my place in lectures, forget meetings with parents. My principal called me in one afternoon, concern on her face. "Diane, you've been an excellent teacher for 15 years, but this semester you seem distracted. Is everything okay at home?" I wanted to tell her, wanted to unload everything. The loneliness, the lies, the woman in the bar, the growing evidence of infidelity. But pride stopped me. "I'm fine. Just tired. The kids are getting older, more demanding. I'll pull it together." Riley was watching me too. One morning before school, she sat next to me at the kitchen table where I was staring blankly at coffee. "Mom, when are you going to leave him?" The question shocked me. "What, Dad? When are you going to leave him? You know he's cheating, right? Tyler and I aren't stupid. We hear you crying at night. We see how he treats you. Why do you stay?" Out of the mouths of teenagers, my 16-year-old daughter could see what I'd been refusing to admit. "It's complicated, honey. Marriage is complicated." "No, Mom, it's not. He treats you like garbage. You deserve better." She grabbed her backpack and left for school, leaving me sitting alone with that truth. Riley's words stayed with me. "You deserve better." Did I? After 17 years of making myself smaller, quieter, more accommodating, I wasn't sure I knew what I deserved anymore. But something had shifted. That direct question from my teenage daughter, the clarity of her perspective. It was like she'd given me permission to see what I'd been avoiding. Dr. Martinez noticed the change in our next session. "You seem different today," she observed. "Less defensive about Marcus." My daughter asked me when I was going to leave him. I said. She said she and Tyler know he's cheating, that they hear me crying at night. Saying it out loud to someone other than myself made it more real. And how did that make you feel? Ashamed. My children have been watching me accept this treatment. I've been modeling a terrible relationship for them. Riley's going to think this is normal, that this is what marriage looks like. Dr. Martinez leaned forward. What you're describing is a significant realization. You're starting to see your situation from outside yourself. That's often the first step toward change. Change. The word terrified me. I was 50 years old. We'd been married for 17 years. I'd given up so much of my career focus to support his dreams. What would change even look like? Starting over at 50, alone, splitting custody of the kids, dividing assets we'd built together. But I also couldn't unsee what I'd seen, couldn't unknow what I knew. The folder on my laptop kept growing. More unexplained charges, more late nights, more lies that didn't add up. Marcus wasn't even being careful anymore. It was like he knew I wouldn't do anything. So why bother hiding it? One Saturday afternoon, Marcus actually brought a woman to our house. I was at the grocery store with Tyler when Riley called me, her voice shaking. Mom, you need to come home. Dad brought someone here. There in his studio. I left the cart half full and drove home with Tyler asking questions I couldn't answer. When we pulled up, I recognized the red-haired woman from the bar sitting on our front porch steps, smoking a cigarette. She looked at me with this smirk, like she knew exactly who I was, and found it amusing. You must be Diane, she said. I'm Sarah. Marcus has told me so much about you. I wanted to scream at her, at him, to throw her off my property. But Tyler was standing right there, watching. So instead I said, Marcus didn't mention we were having guests. How nice to meet you. The fakeness in my voice was so thick I almost choked on it. Marcus came out of the studio, saw me standing there with Tyler, and had the audacity to look annoyed. Oh, you're back. Sarah and I are working on some tracks. We'll be in the studio if you need anything. He guided her back toward the garage, his hand on the small of her back, not even acknowledging how inappropriate this was. Riley came out onto the porch. Mom, are you just going to let him do this? In our house. With us here. Go inside, both of you, I said quietly. Once they were gone, I stood in my driveway, looking at my house, the home we'd made together, and felt something break inside me. Not my heart, that had been broken for years. Something else, the part of me that kept making excuses, kept believing things would change, kept hoping he'd suddenly become the man I'd met at that music festival. I walked into the studio without knocking. They were sitting close together at the mixing board, her hand on his arm. I need to talk to you, I said to Marcus. Alone. Sarah stood up slowly, stretching like a cat. I'll give you to some privacy. Nice meeting you, Diane. The way she said my name, with that slight mockery, told me everything. She knew she was sleeping with a married man, knew she was being paraded in front of his wife, and she enjoyed it. Once she was gone, Marcus turned to me with irritation. What's so urgent that you had to interrupt a working session? Don't bring her here again, ever. I don't care what you're doing outside this house, but you don't bring it here where our children live. He laughed, actually laughed. You don't care what I'm doing. That's rich. You've been obsessing over every move I make for months, and now suddenly you don't care. I care about my children not watching their father disrespect their mother in her own home. That's what I care about. Your home. I paid for this house, my income, my studio, my work. Don't act like you built any of this. His voice was cold, calculated. And if you're so unhappy, Diane, you know where the door is, but you won't leave. You've never had the guts to leave. He was right, and we both knew it. I'd never had the guts to leave, but something about the way he said it, the certainty in his voice that I was too weak to change anything, sparked something in me. You're right, I said. I haven't left, but that doesn't mean I won't. I walked out of the studio, back into the house where my children were pretending to do homework while obviously listening to everything. That night, I didn't cry. Instead, I opened my laptop and started researching divorce lawyers in Austin. I looked at apartment listings. I calculated what my teacher's pension would give me if I had to live alone. The next morning, Marcus acted like nothing had happened. He made coffee, asked if we needed anything from the store, kissed my forehead before leaving for the studio. The casual cruelty of it, the way he could compartmentalize everything, was almost impressive in its coldness. But I'd crossed some internal line. I knew I was going to leave. I didn't know when or how exactly, but the decision was made. I just needed to prepare, to get everything in order, to protect myself and the kids as much as possible. I started moving money from our joint account into one he didn't know about. Small amounts, $50 or $100 at a time. I made copies of important documents. I took photos of valuable items we owned. I talked to a lawyer during my lunch break at school, learned about Texas divorce laws, community property, custody arrangements. Dr. Martinez called this my awakening phase. After years of denial and accommodation, I was finally seeing clearly, and what I saw wasn't pretty, but it was true. It happened on a Thursday. I remember because Thursdays were always my long days at school, curriculum planning meetings, after classes. I'd texted Marcus around 3 in the afternoon asking a simple question. Where are you? Need to know if you can pick up Tyler from baseball practice at 5. I was in the teacher's lounge making copies when my phone buzzed. A text from Marcus with a photo attachment. I opened it while standing at the copy machine, the rhythmic sound of pages printing in the background. The photo showed Marcus and Sarah sitting at an outdoor restaurant table. It was clearly taken that day, bright afternoon sunlight, both of them in casual clothes. His arm was around her shoulders. She was leaning into him, smiling at the camera. They looked like a couple, a happy couple, and in the background, I could see the distinctive mural on South Congress. The I love you so much wall that tourists always photographed. He was in Austin, had been in Austin the whole time, not at a session in San Antonio like he'd told me that morning, but it was the caption under the photo that made my knees weak. Does this answer your question? He'd sent it on purpose. This wasn't a mistake, wasn't an accidental text to the wrong person. He wanted me to see this. He wanted me to know. The cruelty of it, the deliberateness, hit me harder than any of the lies I'd caught him in before. My hands were shaking so badly, I almost dropped my phone. The copy machine kept spitting out papers. Another teacher walked in, asked if I was okay. I must have looked terrible because she immediately got concerned. Diane, what happened? I couldn't speak, just shook my head and walked out, leaving my copies, my bag, everything. I made it to my car before I started crying. These huge, ugly sobs that felt like they were ripping out of my chest. 17 years. 17 years of marriage, of accommodation, of making excuses, of believing things would get better. And this is how he chose to end it. Not a conversation, not even an argument. A photo. A calculated, cruel photo designed to hurt me as much as possible. I sat in that parking lot for over an hour, crying and shaking. Other teachers walked past, some glancing at my car with concern but not stopping. My phone kept buzzing. Tyler texting about baseball practice, Riley asking what was for dinner, a parent emailing about a grade, normal life continuing while mine was imploding. Finally, I called Dr. Martinez. She answered immediately, probably heard something in my voice. Diane, what's wrong? He sent me a photo, him with another woman, on purpose. He wanted me to see it. There was a pause. Where are you right now? School parking lot. I can't go home. I can't face him. I have an opening in 30 minutes. Can you come here? I drove to her office in a daze, running a red light without even noticing until someone honked. Dr. Martinez was waiting when I arrived, her usual professional demeanor replaced with genuine concern. I showed her the photo, the caption, watched her face tighten. This is emotional abuse, Diane. This level of calculated cruelty, sending this photo deliberately. This is someone who wants to hurt you, someone who's been hurting you for a long time. Why would he do this? Why not just tell me he wants a divorce? Why be so cruel? Because cruelty is control. He's showing you that he has the power, that he can do whatever he wants, and there's nothing you can do about it. He's trying to break you down, make you feel small and powerless. But something unexpected happened as I sat in that office, looking at that photo for the 100th time. Instead of feeling broken, I felt something else. Anger. Pure, clean anger that burned away the fog of confusion and self-doubt I'd been living in. I'm done, I said. I'm actually done this time. What do you mean? I've been preparing to leave, moving money, gathering documents, talking to a lawyer. I was scared to actually do it, kept finding reasons to wait. But this, I held up my phone with the photo. This is him handing me permission. He wants out, but he's too cowardly to say it. So he's being cruel enough that I'll do it for him. Fine, I'll do it. Dr. Martinez looked at me carefully. Are you sure? This is a big decision to make in a moment of crisis. I'm not making it in a moment. I've been making it for months, piece by piece. This is just the final push I needed. I left her office with a clarity I hadn't felt in years. I called the lawyer I'd consulted weeks before, scheduled an appointment for the next morning. I called my principal and took personal days for the rest of the week. I called Riley and Tyler, told them I'd be home soon, and we needed to have a family meeting. Then I drove home. That photo still open on my phone. Every time I looked at it, instead of pain, I felt resolve. Marcus thought he was destroying me with that image, but he'd actually freed me. When I walked into the house, Marcus was there, sitting on the couch like nothing had happened, watching TV, eating takeout. He looked up when I came in, and I saw something flicker in his eyes. Satisfaction, pride in his cruelty. "We need to talk," I said, my voice steady. "About what?" He was going to play innocent, pretend the photo never happened. "About the photo you sent me today, the one of you and Sarah." He shrugged. "I figured you deserved to know the truth. You've been suspicious for so long, making yourself miserable. Now you know. I'm seeing someone. Actually, I've been seeing several people. I'm not happy in this marriage. Haven't been for years." The casual way he said it, like he was commenting on the weather. "So you thought the best way to tell me was to send a photo designed to humiliate me. I thought you'd appreciate the honesty." That smirk again, like he was enjoying this. "I want a divorce." The smirk faltered. "What? You heard me. I want a divorce. I'm filing tomorrow." "You're overreacting. I knew you'd be dramatic about this." "No, Marcus. I'm done reacting. I'm acting. You want out of this marriage. You've got it. But you're going to find out that ending a 17-year marriage isn't as simple as sending a cruel photo." Marcus's face went through several expressions in rapid succession. Shock, disbelief, then anger. "You can't be serious. You're going to throw away 17 years over one photo." "One photo, Marcus. This has been building for years. The lies, the affairs, the gas. You bringing Sarah to our house. That photo was just the final confirmation of what I already knew. I was honest with you. I told you the truth about seeing other people. Isn't that what you wanted? Honesty." The audacity of that statement almost made me laugh. "You sent me a photo of you with another woman as a response to asking where you were. That's not honesty. That's cruelty. There's a difference." Riley and Tyler appeared in the doorway, both looking uncertain. They'd obviously heard everything. Marcus stood up, trying to regain control of the situation. "Kids, your mother is being irrational. She's overreacting to a misunderstanding." "No," Riley said firmly. "She's not. We've been waiting for her to do this for years, Dad. We knew about your cheating. We're not blind." Tyler nodded. "I'm glad she's finally leaving you." Marcus looked genuinely shocked that his own children were against him. "You don't understand adult relationships. Your mother and I have problems, but this isn't the solution." "You're right," I said. "I don't think the kids should be part of this conversation." "Riley, Tyler, can you give us a few minutes?" After they left, Marcus tried a different approach. His voice softened, became pleading. "Diane, come on, we can work through this. I'll end things with Sarah. We can go to counseling. Don't make a rash decision." "Where was this interest in counseling 3 years ago when I begged you to go? Where was this commitment to our marriage when you were parading your girlfriend around Austin? You don't want to fix this, Marcus. You want to control the narrative, but you don't get to anymore. Fine, you want a divorce. File. But I'm not making this easy for you. This house, the studio, everything we've built. I'm not just handing it over because you're having an emotional breakdown." There it was, the real Marcus underneath the temporary contrition. "My lawyer will be in touch." That night, I packed bags for myself and the kids. Marcus watched from the doorway of our bedroom, oscillating between trying to convince me to stay and threatening what the divorce would cost me. I ignored all of it. The decision was made. We stayed at a hotel that night, the three of us crammed into a room with 2 beds. Riley and Tyler ordered pizza while I sat on the balcony, finally allowing myself to feel the weight of what had just happened. 17 years, over. My marriage, ended. The life I'd built, dismantled. But underneath the grief was something else. Relief. A lightness I hadn't felt in years. The next morning, I met with the lawyer, Jennifer Chen. She was mid-40s. Sharp, no nonsense. I showed her the photo, explained the situation. She took notes, asked detailed questions about our finances, our assets, Marcus's business. "Texas is a community property state," she explained. "Everything acquired during the marriage is split. The house, the studio, any income from his work. But we need to do thorough financial discovery. Based on what you're telling me about his behavior, there might be hidden assets, unreported income." Over the next week, as Jennifer began the divorce process, I started my own investigation. I had access to our joint accounts, our credit card statements. I started going through everything systematically, creating spreadsheets, documenting patterns. What I found was staggering. Marcus had been living a completely separate financial life. There were credit cards I didn't know about, with charges going back years, hotel rooms, restaurants, gifts, cash withdrawals of thousands of dollars. He'd been spending our money on his affairs while I was carefully budgeting for groceries. But there was more. I found evidence of a separate bank account, one with my name on it that I'd never opened. When I called the bank, they confirmed someone had opened it with my information 2 years ago. Marcus had been forging my signature, moving money around. Jennifer's eyes lit up when I showed her this. This is fraud. Identity theft. This changes everything. He's not just a cheating husband, he's potentially committed crimes. I also started talking to other women in the Austin music scene. Once word got out about the divorce, several reached out to me privately. Apparently, Sarah wasn't the first woman Marcus had openly paraded around. There had been others over the years. One woman, a singer named Melissa, told me she'd been in a relationship with Marcus for 3 years while we were married. She'd had no idea he was married until she saw him at a show with his wedding ring on. He told me he was single, she said when we met for coffee, that he owned the studio outright, that he was this successful, available guy. I'm so sorry, Diane. I would never have gotten involved if I'd known. Another woman, Katie, had a worse story. Marcus had borrowed money from her, supposedly for studio equipment, $10,000 that he never paid back. When she pressed him about it, he'd ghosted her completely. She was considering taking him to small claims court. The picture that emerged was of a man who'd been running scams for years, using his charm, his position in the music community, his marriage as cover. I'd been the respectable wife at home, while he lived like a single man using our joint money and credit. Marcus's attempts to control the divorce narrative fell apart quickly. Jennifer filed for emergency orders, got me temporary exclusive use of the house, froze joint accounts. His lawyer, realizing the financial fraud, advised him to settle quickly to avoid criminal charges. But Marcus couldn't help himself. He started a smear campaign on social media, posting vague statements about toxic relationships and finally being free. He painted himself as the victim, the misunderstood artist trapped in a controlling marriage. The Austin music community saw right through it. People who'd watched him for years, who'd seen him with various women while I was home with the kids, started speaking up. Comments on his posts calling him out, musicians refusing to work with him. His reputation, the thing he'd valued most, was crumbling. The divorce took 14 months to finalize. 14 months of depositions, financial discovery, court appearances. Marcus fought everything, not because he wanted to stay married, but because he couldn't stand losing control. Every asset was contested, every detail argued over. Jennifer was relentless in her discovery process. She brought in a forensic accountant who traced every dollar Marcus had hidden, spent, or stolen. The full picture that emerged was worse than I'd imagined. Over the course of our marriage, Marcus had spent over $200,000 on his affairs, hotel rooms, trips, gifts, rent for apartments I didn't know about, money that should have been going toward our retirement, the kids' college funds, our future. The studio, which Marcus claimed was solely his because he built it, was actually half funded by inheritance money from my grandmother that I'd contributed to the marriage. Jennifer documented everything, showed how my teaching income had subsidized the lean years while Marcus was establishing himself. Marcus's lawyer tried to paint me as vindictive, a scorned woman destroying a good man's reputation. But Jennifer had the receipts. Literally, she presented the forged bank documents, the evidence of identity theft, the pattern of financial abuse spanning years. The judge was not impressed with Marcus. Riley testified in a closed session about what she'd witnessed growing up, the affairs she'd known about, the times Marcus had brought women to the house, the way he'd gaslit me constantly. Tyler, though younger, corroborated everything. Having my children speak so clearly about what they'd observed was both heartbreaking and validating. The Austin music community's response split along interesting lines. The older, established musicians who'd known Marcus for decades were disgusted. Many of them were family men themselves, and his behavior violated their sense of ethics. Younger musicians, especially some who'd benefited from his connections, tried to stay neutral or defend him. But the women in the scene were unequivocal. Multiple female artists and industry professionals came forward with their own stories: sexual harassment, financial manipulation, promises of career advancement in exchange for personal favors, a pattern of predatory behavior that had been whispered about for years, but never addressed publicly. His studio partners, the business associates he'd always claimed were so loyal, discovered he'd been embezzling from the business, using company funds for personal expenses, hiding income. They filed a separate lawsuit, which only strengthened my divorce case. Marcus's world was imploding, and instead of taking responsibility, he doubled down. He created a blog where he posted long, rambling essays about being the victim of a conspiracy, how his ex-wife and daughter had brainwashed his son against him, how the music community he'd given everything to had turned on him unfairly. The posts were unhinged, paranoid, increasingly desperate. His lawyer advised him to take it down, but Marcus wouldn't. He needed the narrative to be about his victimhood, couldn't accept that he'd destroyed everything himself. Through all of this, I felt strangely calm. The initial shock and pain had given way to a kind of detached clarity. I was watching a man I'd been married to for 17 years reveal himself to be someone I'd never really known. The charming musician I'd met at a festival was a mask. This desperate, cruel person lashing out at everyone was who he'd always been underneath. The financial settlement ended up being more favorable to me than Texas law typically allowed because of the fraud. I got the house, minus the mortgage. Marcus got the studio, but had to buy me out of my stake. Child support was substantial because the court imputed income to him based on what the forensic accountant proved he'd been making, not what he'd been claiming. Most importantly, I got primary custody. Marcus would have supervised visitation until Tyler turned 18. And Riley, now 18, could choose not to see him at all. She chose not to. The day the divorce was finalized, I drove home alone and sat in my car in the driveway. The same house I'd lived in for 15 years, but now it was just mine. My name on the deed, my rules inside, my life. Riley came out and tapped on the window. "You okay, Mom?" I nodded, surprising myself by smiling. I really am. That evening, the three of us ordered pizza and ate on the living room floor like we were celebrating something, which, I realized, we were celebrating freedom. The end of walking on eggshells, the end of lies and gaslighting, the end of watching Marcus come and go while we stayed suspended in uncertainty. "Can I ask you something?" Tyler said, halfway through his second slice. "Why did you stay so long?" Even I could see he was a jerk, and I was just a kid. It was a fair question, one I'd been asking myself. I think I kept believing he'd change, that the man I met at that festival was the real Marcus, and this other version was temporary. It took me a long time to understand that the mask was the festival version. The real Marcus was the one we lived with. Riley nodded. "I get that. I kept waiting for you to leave, but I also understood why you didn't. He made you doubt yourself constantly." He did, but not anymore. We spent the rest of that evening watching movies, the three of us crowded on the couch with blankets and snacks. It felt like the first normal family night we'd had in years. No tension, no wondering when Marcus would come home and what mood he'd be in. Just us, together, finally safe. The first year after the divorce was finalized was about learning to be myself again. I'd spent so long accommodating Marcus, anticipating his moods, managing his chaos, that I'd forgotten what it felt like to just exist without that constant background anxiety. Small things surprised me, like being able to make dinner without wondering if Marcus would show up or not. Watching TV shows I actually wanted to watch instead of whatever he put on. Going to bed at a reasonable hour instead of staying up waiting to hear his car in the driveway. These tiny freedoms added up to something significant. I went back to teaching full-time, throwing myself into work with renewed energy. My students noticed the change. "Ms. Harris, you seem different this year," one of my seniors said. "Like, happier?" It made me sad that the difference was so obvious, that I'd been walking around visibly unhappy for so long. The house felt different too. I redecorated slowly, replacing things that reminded me of Marcus. The couch where he'd spent hours on his phone ignoring his family went first. I painted the bedroom a soft blue instead of the dark gray he'd insisted on. I hung art I liked, not pieces chosen to impress his music scene friends. Riley went off to college in California, and Tyler was in his senior year of high school. Both of them seemed lighter, happier, without the tension of Marcus's presence. Tyler's grades improved. He joined drama club, something he never would have done with Marcus, making fun of anything that wasn't sports or music. My relationship with Dr. Martinez shifted from crisis management to genuine growth work. We talked about patterns I'd fallen into, why I'd accepted so little for so long, how to recognize red flags in the future. You were young when you met Marcus, she reminded me. 35 seems adult, but you'd never had a serious, long-term relationship. You didn't know what normal looked like. The Austin community surprised me. While Marcus's reputation had tanked, mine had somehow improved. Other women reached out, some sharing their own stories of difficult marriages, others just offering friendship. I joined a book club, started going to community events, reconnected with teaching colleagues I'd neglected during my marriage. One Saturday morning, about 18 months after the divorce, I ran into Marcus at a coffee shop. It was the first time I'd seen him in person since court. He looked older, tired, his clothes rumpled. The confident musician I'd met at that festival, the image he'd maintained for so long, was completely gone. "Diane," he said, looking uncomfortable. "How are you?" "I'm good," I said honestly. "Really good." There was an awkward pause. Part of me expected him to launch into accusations or excuses, but he just looked defeated. "The kids doing okay?" "They're doing great. Riley's thriving at college. Tyler's applying to schools next month." He nodded, seemed like he wanted to say more, but didn't. We stood there for a moment in this strange limbo. Two people who'd shared 17 years of life now, complete strangers. Then he left without ordering coffee, and I realized I felt nothing. Not anger, not pain, not even satisfaction at how far he'd fallen. Just ... nothing. That moment of indifference felt like the final healing. When someone who once defined your entire world becomes just another person you once knew, you've truly moved on. Around this time, I started volunteering at a women's community center in East Austin. They offered support services for women leaving abusive relationships, help with legal resources, job training, childcare. Working there once a week, helping other women navigate what I'd been through, gave my experience meaning. I met women in their 20s just figuring out they were being manipulated, women in their 60s leaving marriages after 40 years, women with children, women alone, women of all backgrounds united by the experience of having to rebuild from nothing. Their strength inspired me, reminded me that I wasn't special or unique. I was just one of millions of women who'd had to choose themselves. One woman, Jennifer, became a particular friend. She was 38, leaving a 15-year marriage to a tech executive who'd been controlling every aspect of her life. "How did you do it?" she asked me during one of our sessions. "How did you start over at 50? "One day at a time," I told her. "One small decision after another." It felt impossible at first, but eventually you wake up and realize you've built a whole new life without even noticing. My finances stabilized. The child support and my teaching salary were enough. I wasn't living luxuriously, but I was comfortable, and most importantly, I was independent. Every bill I paid, every decision I made about my own money, felt like a small victory. Riley came home for Thanksgiving that second year, bringing her boyfriend. Watching them together, seeing how he treated her with respect and consideration, how they made decisions together, how he listened when she spoke, I felt this overwhelming relief. She'd learned from my mistakes. She knew what healthy looked like because she'd seen what unhealthy looked like. Tyler got accepted to UT Austin with a scholarship. He'd be staying close to home, which made me happy, but he'd also be living on campus, having his own experience. The morning I dropped him off at his dorm, I cried in my car for an hour. Not sad tears, though there was some of that, mostly relief. Both my kids had made it through their parents' toxic marriage and come out okay, better than okay. That night, coming home to a completely empty house for the first time in over 20 years, I sat in my living room and just listened to the silence. No TV blaring, no arguments, no tension, just peace. Block 09, Conoscendo Novo Amor e Contrast 5.000 characters. I met Daniel at the Women's Community Center, of all places. He was there to lead a financial literacy workshop for women rebuilding their lives after divorce. He was a financial advisor who volunteered his time teaching basic budgeting, credit repair, investment strategies. I sat in on his workshop to support some of the women I'd been mentoring. He was 58, divorced for 8 years, with grown children of his own. He had kind eyes and a gentle way of explaining complicated concepts. When one woman broke down crying because she felt overwhelmed by her financial situation, he was patient and compassionate, taking extra time to walk her through the basics. After the workshop, I thanked him for volunteering. "These women really need this kind of practical help," I said. "Most of them are starting from zero." "I know the feeling," he said. "My ex-wife cleaned out our accounts when she left. Took me years to rebuild. If I can help someone avoid some of the mistakes I made, it's worth a few hours a month. We talked for 20 minutes about the center's programs, about the challenges facing women leaving abusive relationships. He asked thoughtful questions, really listened to the answers. When I mentioned I was a teacher, he didn't change the subject like Marcus always had. Instead, he asked what I taught, what age group, what I loved about it. Would you like to grab coffee sometime? He asked as we were leaving. I'd love to hear more about your work at the center. I hesitated. It had been 3 years since my divorce, 2 years since I'd felt truly healed, but dating still seemed daunting. Just coffee, he added, reading my hesitation. No pressure, just conversation. We met at a small cafe in Hyde Park the following Saturday. What was supposed to be an hour turned into 4. Daniel was easy to talk to, asked real questions, shared openly about his own life. He'd been married for 25 years to a woman who'd had a gambling addiction she'd hidden from him. By the time he discovered it, they were hundreds of thousands of dollars in debt. The betrayal wasn't just the gambling, he said. It was the lies, the elaborate cover stories, making me feel crazy for questioning things. I understand what the women at the center are going through because I lived a version of it. I found myself telling him about Marcus, about the 17 years of lies, the deliberate cruelty of that photo. Daniel didn't interrupt, didn't offer advice, just listened. When I finished, he said something that stayed with me. The worst part isn't the ending. It's realizing how much of your life was built on fiction. We started seeing each other regularly. Coffee dates became dinner dates, became weekend hikes. Daniel was nothing like Marcus. He called when he said he would. He showed up on time. He asked about my day and actually listened to the answer. He met my kids and was genuinely interested in their lives, asking Tyler about his classes, asking Riley about her career plans. The difference was stark. With Marcus, I'd always felt like I was performing, trying to be interesting enough, supportive enough, understanding enough. With Daniel, I could just be myself. We'd sit in comfortable silence reading books on his porch. We'd have disagreements about movies or politics, and it was just conversation, not a power struggle. Riley noticed immediately when she came home for winter break. Mom, you're different. Lighter, somehow. When she met Daniel, she pulled me aside later. He's actually interested in what you have to say. It's weird seeing you with someone who treats you like an equal. That observation made me sad and happy simultaneously. Sad that the difference was so obvious. Happy that she could recognize what healthy looked like. Daniel never rushed me. He understood that after 17 years with someone manipulative, I needed time to trust again. When I had moments of panic, wondering if I was missing red flags, he was patient. Take all the time you need, he said. I'm not going anywhere. About 6 months into our relationship, Daniel met me for lunch looking serious. My immediate reaction was panic. Here it comes, I thought, the other shoe dropping, the revelation of some hidden life. I need to tell you something, he said, and my heart started racing. I'm falling in love with you, and I wanted you to know. No pressure, no expectations. I just wanted to be honest about where I am. The contrast to Marcus couldn't have been clearer. Marcus had used I love you as a tool, a way to manipulate and control. Daniel offered it as information, with no strings attached. You don't have to say anything back, he continued. I know you're still healing. I just wanted you to know. I started crying right there, in the restaurant. Happy tears, relief tears, grateful tears. I think I'm falling in love with you too, I said, and that terrifies me. I know, it terrifies me too, but I think that's normal when you've been hurt before. We can be terrified together. Our relationship deepened slowly, carefully. Daniel never made demands, never guilt-tripped me when I needed space, never turned my concerns back on me. If I said I was uncomfortable with something, he listened and adjusted. If he was bothered by something, he brought it up directly instead of punishing me with silence. Tyler loved him. He actually shows up. 2 things, he said after Daniel came to one of his college theater performances, and he asks real questions, not just pretends to be interested. One evening, lying on Daniel's couch watching a movie, I had this moment of profound peace. I wasn't anxious about when he'd leave or who he was texting or whether he was telling me the truth. I was just happy, in that uncomplicated way I'd forgotten was possible. What are you thinking? Daniel asked, noticing my smile. That I'm happy. Just genuinely, simply happy. I forgot what this felt like. He kissed my forehead. You deserve to feel this way every day. And for the first time in decades, I believed it. Today I'm 55 years old, sitting on the porch of my Hyde Park home with a cup of coffee, watching the Austin morning unfold. Daniel's inside making breakfast, and I can hear him humming along to the radio. This simple domestic peace still amazes me sometimes. 3 years ago, I couldn't have imagined this kind of happiness existed. The kids are thriving. Riley got promoted at her marketing firm in San Francisco and is talking about getting married to her boyfriend next year. Tyler graduated from UT and is teaching middle school English here in Austin, following in my footsteps. Watching him with his students, seeing his patience and enthusiasm, fills me with pride. I retired from full-time teaching last year, but still substitute occasionally. I increased my volunteer hours at the Women's Center, and Daniel and I now co-lead workshops together. We've helped dozens of women navigate divorces, rebuild credit, create financial plans. Turning my pain into purpose has been one of the most healing things I've done. Marcus is still in Austin, from what I hear. His studio closed years ago. He works odd jobs in the service industry, lives in a small apartment, alienated from most people who once knew him. Riley sees him occasionally out of obligation, but their relationship is surface level. Tyler hasn't spoken to him in over a year. I don't take satisfaction in his struggles, but I also don't carry guilt about them. He created his own consequences. What I want you to understand, if you're watching this and recognizing pieces of your own life in my story, is that cruelty is never love. When someone deliberately hurts you, when they send you a photo designed to destroy you, when they gaslight you into questioning your own reality, that's not a relationship worth saving. That's abuse disguised as romance.